Welcome to the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. Your guide on this journey is Amy Silvis. If you're ready for the secrets to an abundant life, hit that subscribe button now, and let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another very special edition of the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. I'm your host, Amy Silvis, and oh my gosh, I have a treat for you. I have the great Yonah Weiss. Many of you may recognize him. If you don't, you're in for a treat. And we're going to take maybe a little bit of a different angle on talking about Yonah. He is a multidimensional man, and I think he and I have resonated on this topic of abundance. So I'm excited to get going and get the podcast kicked off. Yonah, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Amy. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. You know, I love podcasting. I think I've said this before, but if I could be doing this full time, I would be totally doing this. Like, you know, the nighttime DJ kind of voice going. I just enjoy it. So I'm grateful to not just be on another podcast, but specifically your podcast. Like you said, we've had a lot of interactions over the years, see eye to eye on many, many levels. So I think this conversation is going to be awesome.
Really special. Yes. I feel like I'm always a few steps behind you and all the cool things that you're doing and that you've mastered. First was LinkedIn. Now it's trying my hand at a podcast. And I love your passion around it. You're clearly very talented and having conversations. So I'm excited to be the one. And I've been on your podcast. So I'm excited to be the one interviewing you. And do you mind giving our listeners a little bit of information about you?
So I got my start as a teacher in my, I guess you would say, professional career for about 15 years. And that really took me through a good portion, you know, post-college until, you know, my mid-30s. And got married, had 6 kids. And at a certain point, I realized I did not really have any savings, you know, besides for the debt, the student debt, and all kinds of things going on. And I realized I needed to make some changes and find something else to fill that void and really help me, you know, get through the next stage of our growing family and our life. And I found real estate of all things. And so really this was about 8-9 years ago. Now you know how old I am. And I found real estate. I started involved just apprenticing a good friend of mine who was a very successful mortgage broker and real estate owner, investor. Learned a tremendous amount from various sources through, you know, Bigger Pockets and obviously through my friend and just networking. One thing led to another, doing some, like I said, mortgage brokering, doing some real estate, residential brokering of properties, some investing, and then found this thing called Cost Segregation. I was introduced to this company, Madison SPECS, really incredible company based out of Lakewood, New Jersey. And I was introduced, they were looking for someone to do kind of business development. I was looking for an opportunity at the time, and it just kind of fit, and I went with it. And here we are 6-7 years later, I've become like the world expert on cost segregation and just really, really love it. Obviously through social media, the LinkedIn specifically, the networking that has come through that has introduced me to such amazing people like yourself and countless others. Literally, I mean, I could count them. It's like, you know, 30,000, but I'm not going to, you know, call off anyone by name except for you, obviously. And that's really led to so many other opportunities in my life that's a little bit about me. I mean, on the cost seg side, Madison, we're the biggest national company doing it. I've personally helped save people over $1 billion in income tax. So that's pretty cool. And host my own podcast as well, as you alluded to. You were a guest on.
Oh, wow, I love it. Oh, there's so much goodness there. You know, just on the money side, I've been one of your clients. You've helped me save quite a bit because you've done, I think, cost seg on every single commercial property that I've purchased, which is not surprising because you are the cost seg king. And you are so, you know, you do cost segregation, but you're really a pillar in our real estate community because that's not just who you are. You're a connector, and you're not just a connector for your own good. I've seen you so many times connect needs with haves, you know, just and build these relationships. Yeah. It's just so inspiring and aligns perfectly with how I view the world. And what's so interesting is as we've gotten to know each other, we have all these fascinating commonalities, right? You grew up in LA just like I did. I think we're around the same age. I'm 42. I think you might be, as well.
Just turned 44, 43.
Well, happy belated. birthday. We both know Eric Rosen. I think a gentleman I went
That's
to, right? I went to college with, or grad school with, and I think he studied under you or with you or something along those lines. So, but when I was creating this podcast, Yonah, thinking about, again, how I can add value, how I can emulate, very similar to what you do in the network. And I just thought, gosh, you're a great person to talk about abundance with, because we've had conversations about giving to others and charity and really, all of that. So I'd love for you to define, as we start the podcast off, what does abundance mean to you?
I'll start off in a very abstract way and then kind of bring it home. I mean, in the abstract way, maybe for some people this might be abstract. Hopefully for others, it will actually be not abstract at all. Is that, I believe that there's a God who created the world, who is infinite, and there are no limitations. And if a person aligns themselves in a spiritual way with purpose, then one's potential is infinite as well. And the amount that you can do for others, which ultimately is our purpose in this world, is really to do for others, is also infinite, is also limitless. And I think abundance means, and kind of bringing it home, is that there is way more than enough of everything for everyone. And so therefore, competition is really looked at as kind of a negative sense. There's obviously, in every negative trait, there is some amount of positive that can be pulled out of it and can be used for the good. And that's really a concept we can get into a little deeper there. But the idea of competition ultimately is a negative thing, meaning if you realize that what you were placed in this world to do is your sole purpose, and nobody else can be doing what you are doing, and no one else can really interfere with what your purpose is and what you're doing. So therefore, the more I can help others, the more I can do for others, the greater it's going to be for not just myself, but for everyone else in the entire world, ultimately.
Trevor McGregor, who you and I both know, calls them God bumps. So you get goosebumps when something really resonates with you. And I just got them twice hearing you talk about that, because what peace could that bring to so many people's lives if they really hold on to what you said of, you're put here with a purpose and nothing can interfere with that. So, you don't have to worry about, gathering things and holding them. You can give freely. You can follow your heart. You can help a need. And like you said, not compete. It's just not necessary. What a powerful mindset to have as we walk through life. Has that perspective changed over time for you? Is this something you were kind of born with and you always knew based on how you were raised, or?
Slightly, obviously, I had growing up some of this, but it definitely has evolved over time for certain. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think anyone is born, to the contrary. Everyone is born with very bad character traits. And, our job in this world is kind of improve ourselves and become better people through that. So, this idea of, I was born this way and therefore I'm bound to that is a foreign concept to me. So yeah, I mean, this has developed over the years through obviously studying, through just interactions, through being around others who obviously, as you know, is probably the greatest way to learn, is through just kind of osmosis of being around great people.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. How do you, maybe this is a little out of balance, but let me know, but how do you instill this in your children? You're a father of 6. You appear to be a family man, very devoted to your family. So, for those parents that are listening that really love what you're saying, do you have any tips or tricks on how to help the next generation embrace this concept?
Parenting is probably the most difficult thing that there is. And I actually heard someone say recently, and it just resonated with me a lot. If parenting is easy, then you're probably not doing a very good job at it. Because as children are our greatest pleasure, a person can really have in this world. I truly believe, but they're also our biggest pain. And and that's absolutely true. Now, that doesn't mean, God forbid, a person shouldn't have children, or, if they can, but how to give over to children is really different for every single child. And that's what I've learned probably the most over the years. And my oldest now is 19. And what I've learned over the years is that every single child learns in a different way. And so you have to teach, and really King Solomon, in Proverbs said this, you have to teach the youth according to their way. Each one has its own path of understanding. Most learn, through example, just and everyone, like I said. So the best thing you can do is just to be an example, just to, show them. And it's difficult, especially, if you're not necessarily around them a lot. They don't necessarily see what I'm doing all day on, on LinkedIn and in my business relationships, which really is a large amount of what I do throughout the day in terms of giving and abundance. They don't really see that. I can give it over. I can, kind of bring them in to see that a little bit, but it's still minimal. So it's really in those interactions at home, which is difficult because again, those, kids are kids, and you're going to have situations that take you out of your kind of balance of where you want to be. And so that ultimately is the best teaching ground, because if they can see, even in a kind of tumultuous environment or situation, you maintain stability, you maintain, composure, then that ultimately is probably the biggest reward and teaching lesson you can have.
That makes a lot of sense of by example. I don't have children myself. I've got a lot of younger cousins that I love being around. And, even as we maybe train people in the workplace or, have influence among our friends or community, we are very social creatures, right? So it makes a lot of sense that you can say one thing, but if the action isn't, isn't compatible or isn't in alignment, especially when things get tough, right? Because it's easy to kind of walk the walk when things are great, but when you're tested and the kids are watching or other people around you are watching, that's truly when the example happens. I have a cousin who's close to me in age. I don't have siblings either, but he's about 6 months younger than me. We've always been extremely close, and it always amazes me how many people reach out to him just because of the example that he sees or that they see about him. How do you have so much peace? How do you feel like everything is going to be okay? Where does that come from? And, he's not out there just kind of talking about himself or, expressing what's on his heart. They're just watching. So it's just a story that comes to mind when you mentioned, that with regards to your children. I appreciate you sharing that. So Yonah, what do you do to cultivate abundance in your life? What does Yonah's life look like to create more of that abundance that's meaningful to you?
Going back to what I was saying before, just connecting with your spiritual purpose in the world really brings that abundance, because the more you do, the more you kind of draw down that abundance. We are ultimately, in a sense, vessels. So if you make yourself a vessel that, doesn't have holes, for example, then you'll be able to contain much, much, much more. And if you make yourself a bigger vessel, by going through challenging things, you kind of broaden your perspectives, you broaden that. You're able to draw more abundance. So I think the challenges that we have, going through them and coming out on top, I guess, in the way that we perceive it, will hopefully help to bring more of that. Abundance is an amazing thing because, like I said, it really is infinite. And so, it's fascinating because, in the business world, for a lot of people, this is almost like a foreign concept. And I think to the contrary, I really think that person can and should function in their business life, the same way. And, with among other people who they're dealing with. And I actually had a podcast I did with good friend of mine, Bernard Reese, a CPA. He's a retirement account expert. He's a CPA, but very, very specializes in that. And we had a discussion one time. It was his idea about how to do good in business. And it was just like about focusing on what you can do for others. And through that, you will ultimately get back, so much more. And I think you obviously know this. You talk about the book, The Go-Giver, quite a bit. It was like fascinating to me because you and others were mentioning this book a few years ago. And I was like, okay, yeah, sounds good. And then describing it, I was like, yeah, I kind of do that, kind of do that anyways. And then I ultimately read it, or listened to it, I should say. And it was like, yeah, that's exactly what I do. And so it was like really cool to kind of see a book that was really published on that, something that really aligned with my viewpoint.
Yeah, I think your name and that book title are often used interchangeably because I think for many people, going back to setting this example, right, that we just talked about, for many people, they see that in you. And it really seems like it's not just a philosophy that you've adopted, but it's almost who you are. I don't know if that feels a little bold, but it just seems like that it's so natural to you to take those words that you said, that it's just how you live life.
It should be one and the same, like who you are and what you do, and what you believe, your philosophy should be one and the same. I think there's there's room for people to kind of separate themselves from what they believe and what they think. And this goes back to what you're talking about in terms of children and education and kind of child rearing in general. Do what I say and not what I do is like one of those famous quotes growing up with, you just like hear that, like it makes you cringe.
Yes.
Because that to me, I think when I saw contradictions of character in other people when I was a kid, it threw me off entirely. And obviously kids pick up on that all the time. So I don't want to interrupt you. I think that's a really important point to be one with who you are and what you believe, not like the story of the ethics professor that, had an affair with one of his students. And when asked about it, he responded, what do you think, the geometry professor has to be a trapezoid? It's not one and the same. And so that to me, that story, whether it's true or not, it just is like the ultimate contradiction of self to me.
Yeah. I thank you. Thank you for emphasizing that, because that American culture does not teach this, at least in my experience. I don't know what your experience has been like. I think a lot of our playbook in life comes from, whether it's our parents or just culture at large or our spirituality or religious practice. And it seems like God has played a big role in your life. Maybe that's the understatement of the year. But I would love to understand a bit more about how your community fosters that for you. But what does that look like? Because to live in almost diametrical contradiction to a culture that you're raised in is not easy. I mean, you really have to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm imagining you have to really lean into your beliefs and what you believe to be true. It is not a passive thing. Is that right? Is that how you would phrase that? Or
absolutely. I don't know if I would phrase it exactly, but it's certainly not passive. That's for sure. It's the ultimate battle, really. I'm an Orthodox, religious Jewish person, and the guidelines that we have for living life are very, very strict and rigid. Yeah. There's a lot of rules, thousands of rules to follow, and it can be somewhat daunting for an outsider to even like understand or fathom how that can be possible.
Right.
But through that, through having rules, you actually come to freedom and you come to a more ability to choose. Because if you are just being influenced by the outside, you don't really have a choice in a lot of ways. And you talk about how people are being raised by the parents or whatever. Unfortunately, it's nowadays by Hollywood and by Disney and by TikTok and all these foreign influences that have an agenda. And that agenda is the exact opposite of spirituality, in my opinion, the exact opposite of abundance. And there's a purpose to that because, I think we talked about this a little bit before, but in a previous conversation, but, the government and, the schools and everything set up in a certain way to create a workforce and to create people who are not, thinkers necessarily. And getting outside of that is a challenge. But it needs to be, it's definitely not passive. I mean, it's an uphill battle all day, every day.
Yes. I'm sure you know who Jocko Willink is, but he talks about, discipline is freedom. And, that what you just mentioned is, again, not what our culture teaches, but I feel like it's inherent in our human spirit that we need a challenge and the rewards that come on the other side of that to not just believe in ourselves, but as a character building trait, that some of the best things in life, need to be worked for. It doesn't mean your whole life has to be, a struggle and, immensely difficult, but there's definitely character forming aspects of having that struggle, whether it's just what life throws at you or whether it's the intentional discipline, like you mentioned, of some of the rules that you follow or, what you believe or what you do. The wisdom that comes from some of these traditions just is always fascinating to me because, as you mentioned, or as maybe I'm assuming, none of this is arbitrary, at least in my perspective. It has a point to it, right?
Yeah.
And it may be greater than what we understand at certain stages of life, but maybe at some point we go, oh, that's why this is who I am because of these activities, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you know this more than many people, having struggles and having obviously a health challenge, probably 9 out of 10 people would kind of give up and throw in the towel. And not push themselves to become better and to try to use that as really a conduit. And I think that's really what it's all about. Obviously it takes time, it takes effort. But yeah, having people around you that share that belief is obviously a really, really powerful support system.
I love that you talk about the gift of community and how abundance can lead to that as well. I agree completely. And I think, a lot of people that I see, that I interview, I talk to hundreds of high net worth individuals and talk to them intimately about what their life is like, what their goals are, what their regrets are, and all of that. And this common theme of abundance, of being in community, because we really aren't designed to be alone, right? This isolation thing is, we take we're designed to give support and to take support and really do this life journey together. Have you ever thought about having multiple streams of income? Instead of relying on just one stream of income where you're trading your time for money, how would you like to free up more of your time and live a more abundant life? As a listener of the show, you're invited to attend one of our upcoming trainings where I'll give you an inside look into how you can add passive income and get all the other perks of recession-resistant real estate investing without the headaches of being a landlord. We'll also be sharing some hidden mistakes to avoid and the criteria I personally look for when evaluating potential investment opportunities. To reserve your seat for free, go to silvuscapital.com/webinar. Again, that special link to reserve your seat for free is silvuscapital.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you on the training. And now back to the show. Is there any area of life, Yonah, where you wish you had more abundance or you're intentionally working towards having more abundance?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, to have more abundance in every area is a wish because, like I said, there's infinite out there. And so as soon as you kind of box yourself in and think, I'd only like to reach, X goal or Y goal, you're limiting yourself. And so realizing, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, that there's infinite potential. And I think the greatest people, and probably the greatest quality I should start with, in my opinion, is humility. The greatest quality, because that comes, by learning from others and not being afraid to ask questions, things like that. But ultimate humility, in my opinion, is realizing how little of your potential that you have actually achieved. And realizing that, it's everything that I do have is not for me anyways, right? It's all from God. And so realizing that, okay, and I can be even greater. And so, yes, constantly striving, constantly wanting more and more, I think is part and parcel of being an abundant person.
I love that you mentioned, what you have isn't necessarily yours, it's God's. I will never forget about, I think maybe 15 years ago, I wish I remembered the title of the book, but it was about money stewardship and how money isn't mine, it's God's, and it's to flow through me and for me to spread it. And it was such a paradigm shift of, oh, wow. We're repeating this, but I think a different way of looking at it of, I don't need to hoard this money because it doesn't belong to me. And thinking then about the impact that the money can have if you give it away freely, it is such a powerful and freeing mindset. At least it was for me.
Yeah, but I think it's also an extreme minority opinion, right? Like most people don't think like that. And that's the challenge. Also coming back to the society's influence. Society's influence is you have to buy this and you have to have this, and it's about you. And it's all about the individual. Abundance is the exact opposite, is not thinking about yourself, not necessarily ignoring yourself. Obviously, you have to start with loving yourself. You have to start with becoming a good person. But ultimately, like you said, knowing that I'm here for a purpose. If I have something, it means I can help someone else, right? It's like I was on my website, but I was taught by my grandmother, that if ABCs, you can teach someone ABCs. And so it's not just abundance with wealth, it's abundance with knowledge and with, everything in your life. Like if you have something, you can give that to someone else. And it doesn't detract from what you actually have, believe it or not. I think it's the biggest misconception is that people think, well, if I give away, my money, I'm not going to have any. If you truly believe that the abundance is coming from an infinite source, then there's no limitations. And actually, the more that you give away, the more that you get in return. I honestly believe that. So, and so too with knowledge, you're by sharing your knowledge, you're not decreasing from anything you have. To the contrary, you're actually becoming smarter and more knowledgeable, because the more you teach something, the smarter you get, the more you understand something on another level.
We see that in a tiny little Yonah microcosm with your LinkedIn challenge, where you give all this information away for free to help people build their businesses, build their community. I know it's an incredibly beneficial challenge for so many, and I'm sure not easy for you to put together and do, but you do it, sometimes 4 times a year for 2 weeks at a time out of the goodness of your heart. I think that's a prime example of, you're giving away a lot of your knowledge, but hopefully you're also benefiting as well, if not just at your heart level, but at other levels as well. That's really neat. So, Yonah, I'm thinking about what you shared at the very beginning of your path. You're a teacher, and then you had a growing family, and maybe not a lot of savings, and that was kind of your pathway. One thing you didn't mention, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, is this charity that you set up to help people that seem to be in quite dire need. And having 6 children is not easy. A teacher's salary, I'm imagining, is not necessarily maybe as abundant as you would like. So to have that mindset of, hey, I have my own things that my family and I need, but there's still space for me to be abundant to others. There's still time, resources, connections, whatever it is, to set up this charity. Can you walk us through kind of what that was like? I know you're humble, but I would love just a little bit of insight in that respect, if you wouldn't mind.
I think what the kind of the point they used to describe that is that, you have all this time, all this, obligations and responsibilities, and it's hard to kind of fit in something else on top of
right.
that. And the truth of the matter is, there's, like I said, again, I don't want to keep reiterating this over and over, but there's abundant potential. There's infinite potential. And it's similar to like having children. I saw this with having children, is that one might think, oh, you have your first child. I love this child more than anything in the world, right? And then when your second child is born, I love this child, more than anything in the world, and also the second one. So how can it be possible to love 2 people more than anything in the world? And the truth of the matter is, there is room, and there's room in your heart to feel and to love beyond what you even imagined was possible if you just commit yourself to doing it. And so, going back to what we said earlier also about setting goals, right? Doing things like, I want to accomplish, shooting for the stars, you'll hit the moon, right? Cliches. But doing things that are out of your comfort level, because ultimately that it's for a good purpose. You'll find the time, you'll find the room, you'll find doing that. And so I had, people in my community that were struggling, and I personally was was in that situation also, struggling. So I knew what it was like. And when something happens, when a health crisis arises, or a death in the family, or many, many other things, a person loses a job. I spoke with a good friend today. He was at his last job. He wasn't paid for 6 months. 6 months. They didn't end up paying him, and it was like, can he do anything about it? Does he have any recourse? Maybe it might take a long time till he sees any of that. But in the end of the day, he didn't have money to pay rent, like literally. And a good friend of mine, I went and helped him out. But that is the message. When you have someone in your life, coming in and showing you there's a need, there's someone else. I didn't have any funds on my own at the time, but I took it upon myself to go and fundraise, and to go and collect money, and had used resources, other people, a good friend of mine who was an attorney that helped set up, the nonprofit, the 501c3, filing everything. I didn't know anything how to do that. Another friend who had a finance background, and he was, working on the tax side of the things, and people came together to help and volunteered to do that. And ultimately, raised millions of dollars really to help people in need. And the more you help people, the more you realize how many people out there that really actually need help, and it's hard. So at a certain point, to be honest, I actually passed the reins off to someone else when things in my life became a little more challenging. It was, other opportunities came up. I passed the reins off to someone else who was suited to do that. But when you realize that giving is the ultimate reward, really, and this is something I've said before, in Hebrew, and the Hebrew language is the most fascinating language on the planet. I'm not a linguist, so I only know a few languages, but every single word has such depth and such meaning to it that it has multiple meanings. And not to get too into that, but there's a word it says in the Torah, in the Bible, about giving, about charity, about giving. And the word used is actually a palindrome. Okay. The word to give, right, is a palindrome. And so the lesson there is obvious, is that when you give, you're ultimately receiving much, much more.
Wow, that's really impactful. That is really, really impactful. And we talk on this podcast how money isn't the destination, it's just a vehicle for abundance. And thinking about, being in a position when you have financial abundance opens up the doors to meet the needs of people that you have in your life, on a one-off basis. I've seen you do that. We've, partnered together in small little ways on occasion to be able to do that. And how powerful that can be to have financial abundance, not just for yourself, but again, I know we've talked about this already several times in the podcast, but to let it flow through you and meet the needs that inevitably will come. And inevitably, we, either in our past or in the future, may need to be on the receiving end of that. And that's this beautiful connection. And it's not just about, I have a need and I can fulfill it, but it's the connection that comes together. I'm imagining as you had this vision to start this charity and you gave the opportunity for a lawyer to come in and help and the opportunity for a CPA, and your relationships are strengthened. Not just are you serving the people that you're giving the money to, but you get to have this beautiful connection with other people with this common goal. There are just so many layers to the goodness that comes. And I don't want anyone to miss out on that joy, on that pleasure, on, we're really designed to be happiest when we're giving. It's how God made us, I believe, and my tradition teaches me. And so to miss out on that, the key for me, Yonah, though, is I'm not a good receiver. So I need to, I'm constantly reminded that if I love to give, I need to give others the opportunity to give to me.
I'm the same way, as you can imagine.
Are you?
Of course.
Yeah. But it's like, hey, you're cheating someone out of the opportunity to give. Like, oh, okay, that is a different perspective that I need to remember more. But I'm not that great at it yet, admittedly.
Yeah, but ultimately, you don't even need, you talk about having, obviously, the more money you have, the more wealth you have, the more you can spread that, the more you can help people. You don't need money to help people. And you don't need a lot of it for sure. Because even if you start small, right? Literally, obviously, the Bible talks about giving a tenth, right? Tithing and things like that, whether that's after expenses or before expenses, different opinions there. But if you make $1, right, you can give 10 cents. It's much easier to give 10 cents when you have $1 than to try to give $100,000 when you make $1 million. It's much, much easier to give 10 cents.
Right.
So you have to start small. When you start small, you'll end up being that. And, obviously this is another cliche, but, money really just is an amplifier of who you are. And the more money you have, right, if you are a giving person, the more you'll give. It's just, equal. Unfortunately, again, the society teaches us the opposite. The society teaches us, think about yourself and increase your standard of living, right? You make more money, buy a new car, right? Get a bigger house, buy more stuff, right? Which ultimately doesn't bring happiness at all. But that's what they teach us. And again, it's really the cycle to keep people tied to the handcuffs to their jobs and things like that. But, a quote I heard a long time ago, again, I don't know who this is from, but it just resonated with me a lot, is that when your wealth increases, don't increase your standard of giving. Sorry, I messed it up.
Okay.
Well, your editors can take that out. No, Don't increase your standard of living, increase your standard of giving. Yeah, that's awesome. That's how it goes.
Powerful. When I remember, I don't know, these conversations you and I have had over LinkedIn DMs just keep popping in my brain, but I'll never forget. I don't know if we were talking personally or if it was on, a bigger stage, but when inflation was higher, I remember you saying, it's decreasing in value anyway. If I hold on to it, it's just going to be worth less. So, I mean, I know that's not your primary purpose, but again, these layers of perspectives that just all come together and link to the same place of, let it flow through you. Whatever reason resonates with you, hopefully all of them do. But I just thought, gosh, what wisdom is there in that? It's not going to do me any good to hold on to it and, maybe in a few years it's going to be worthless. Put it to work now and help people that have needs now. Brilliant.
We can't take it with us in the grave. That's, I think, the most important thing to remember on a daily basis. Many people just stacking wealth and trying to, get all that. And then ultimately, what good does it do them?
Yeah. Well, last question, Yonah. I mean, obviously you have brilliant perspectives on abundance for people that you've opened their eyes. They're listening to this podcast because they've realized that culture lied to them and having a whole bunch of money isn't bringing them the abundance in their heart that they want. What advice, one step, one tactic, tool tip would you have for someone to take a next best step to create more abundance in their life?
You know what really actually I think everyone can relate to? There's an amazing book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? By Stephen Covey. And in there is right at the beginning, really, he has a whole section on the abundance mindset. And I think just learning about it, listening to this podcast, learning things like that, and then trying to apply it. Again, if it's just a little thing, if it's just giving, 10 cents on the dollar, if it's just helping one person, and that's a great acronym that I heard from a friend of mine. HOPE, help one person every day, and that if you can just make it a commitment to yourself to just go out of your way to help one person, whether big or small, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You get yourself into the routine and it becomes second nature. And it's not like, oh, this is some really lofty goals of being like that and it's hard to relate to. Just start a little by little and you will become a changed person.
This is so powerful. I know we're at time. I cannot thank you enough for imparting your wisdom, your heart. So many people are going to get so much out of this. And thank you for being such a giver yourself. What is the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they like to utilize your services or just get more Yonah wisdom or Weiss Advice? Excuse me. I always mess that up. Get some more Weiss Advice. Yeah.
You can always, check out Weiss Advice podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can go to my website, yonaHweiss.com, but I'm most active on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So for sure, reach out, but make sure, and I always say this, don't just connect with me. Don't just hit that follow button. Take 10 seconds and write a little note that you heard me on Amy's podcast. It would really make a big difference. Start a conversation instead of just having random people following.
I love it. Thanks again, Yonah, for being you. Thank you for your friendship. Everyone, thanks for listening. I hope you have an incredibly abundant day. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that will empower you on your journey towards abundance. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the secrets to an abundant life too. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn, Amy Silvis. Keep striving for your goals, nurturing your relationships, and embracing the adventure that is life. Until next time, we wish you an abundantly fulfilling day.